Eyewitness News presents Newsmakers with your hosts Jane Ann Bugda and Andy Mahalchik.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Jane Ann Bugda along with Andy Mahalchik. With the stroke of the governor's pen and a paw print from a dog named Libre, Pennsylvania now has tough animal laws. Today we're going to take a look at those laws and what it means to be a responsible pet owner. I'll introduce you to our guests. And our discussion will begin when this edition of Newsmakers returns right after this. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Jane Ann Bugda along with Andy Mahalchik. Pets enrich our lives, and that's why as animal lovers it's important that we protect their rights. Today we are talking about new laws in the state and about the responsibility of pet owners and finding forever homes for some animals who are currently looking for new families to love them. We are joined by representatives from the SPCA of Luzerne County, Todd Hebner, who is the executive director, Wayne Harvey, who is a humane officer, and attorney Gary Tiroli, who is the counsel for the SPCA. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Welcome, guys.
And we've been covering a lot about the new laws that are enacted in the state and about protecting our pets, and we'll be getting to that a little bit. But first, we want to give a little bit of a background about the SPCA to our viewers. So, what is the SPCA?
The SPCA is the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. We are a private 501c3 animal welfare organization. We are the only open admission shelter within Luzerne County. And what we really are is a group of individuals, volunteers, friends of, partners that care a lot about animals and have taken on the responsibility to protect those animals in our community.
And how do you differ from other shelters in our region?
I think probably the most notable difference is we are an open admission shelter, which means we virtually accept every animal that comes to our door, with very few exceptions. The most notable is it must have originated inside our county's limits.
And talking about the numbers of animals, we talk about this all the time. 6,000 at least.
Yeah.
You take care of every year. How is that even possible?
It is. It's a daily challenge, but it's one that I think is very satisfying for us, and we find joy in. Our organization has seen numbers as high as 14,000.
Wow.
I think our efforts as a community to spay and neuter and things of that nature have really brought our stray numbers down considerably.
And do you work with the other shelters in the area and the other groups?
We work with many other shelters to transfer animals out, hold animals. We collaborate at times with cruelty cases, and certainly are looking for every opportunity at a new life for the animals that come into our care.
Now, for the next half hour, we have a lot of topics to discuss. Libre's law, which really has beefed up the laws in Pennsylvania to bring them in line with other states around the country. Some are saying long overdue. But let me talk about animal abuse cases. And Wayne and I were talking about how over the years, and we covered as a reporter numerous cases over the years. But because I think of social media and more awareness, we're hearing more about it, you're hearing more about it. How tough are those cases to investigate, Wayne? You're out there in the field every day, sometimes all day long. How hard are they to investigate when you get a report of an animal abuse? What do you do? What's the procedure?
Well, the first thing we do is we talk to the person, hopefully, who called it in, get more details as to what's going on. Then we go to the scene, investigate, see what's happening there. If there is a crime, we feel, then we try talking to the owner of the animal and educating them, trying to get a change made. For example, you may get a case where the shelter is not adequate for the animal. And we try to talk to the owner, said, you need to do that, you need to get this strengthened up, fixed up, whatever, because right now you're in violation. And 80% of the time they cooperate and we get the animal to proper shelter, and we walk away satisfied, the animal's okay, and the owner as well. But there are other certain cases that the owner will not cooperate, and we have to take action, file a citation, and in extreme cases we have to get a search warrant and take their animal from them. We try to avoid that at all costs, but unfortunately sometimes that's what we have to do.
And we've seen those extreme cases where sometimes, and we'll talk more about this later, people go to jail because of it. Mm-hmm. And those extreme cases, are you getting more tips on those cases because of the media exposure and social media?
We feel so. I think because of social media and the news media is exposing a lot of this to the public. When they're looking out, they're seeing these things, and oh yeah, that may be a cruelty case. I better call that in, and in that way we get more tips and more information and more investigations undertaken.
And someone should not be afraid to call in if they see something or maybe even suspect something.
No, we encourage that. Call it in. If you're not sure, I'd rather you call it in and have something not wrong than to say, well, you know, maybe we better not call it in, and maybe there's really nothing, and have an animal in jeopardy and something happen to it. So I don't mind going on these calls. If there's nothing wrong, we walk away happy, and everybody's satisfied, and it's a good thing.
You know, let's talk a little bit about, you know, you mentioned in extreme cases, action has to be taken, but a lot of times the law wasn't there to back you up, and now there is a new law, and it's called Libre's law. Let's talk a little bit about that. It was signed by the governor and a puppy named Libre, who was in pretty bad condition when he was found. Explain what the law is to us.
Libre's
Well,
law, you want to take it? That's okay.
I guess I'll try to summarize. Give you an example. A torture murder of an animal under the old law could get you a maximum of 2 years in jail and a fine of not less than $1,000. Now under Libre's law, that's moved from a misdemeanor 1 to a felony, and you can get 7 years in jail and a fine of not less than $15,000. So a felony is a serious crime. You become sort of a non-citizen when you have a felony on your record, and that's something that we applaud, because it's been well documented by scientific inquiry that those who abuse animals go on to abuse children, women, elderly, anybody that's susceptible to them. And so it's good to stop it before it gets going.
And you know, now that the law is in place, what are you hearing from people about it? I guess there's a collective sigh of relief, but why did it take Pennsylvania so long?
There are opponents of these laws. You know, at times, I don't think it was with regard to Libre's law, because that granted additional protections for horses. But at times, the farm lobby has opposed some of these laws because they're afraid they're going to get told how to deal with their farm animals. And, you know, unfortunately, from time to time, the NRA has opposed all animal protective laws. At the federal level, they oppose the Cecil Act, which would stop hunting of endangered and threatened species. They oppose the ivory ban. And you wonder to yourself, what has that got to do with the right to bear arms? I don't understand it. So,
Is it safe to say, guys, that, and again, from covering these kind of situations for almost 40 years now, I remember, and again, anecdotally, folks, people will say to me, I didn't call in, I'm afraid because this guy's abusing my pet or my neighbor's dog or cat, but I know he's going to get a slap on the wrist, nothing's going to happen, and then I have to deal with that person in my neighborhood or that family member. But have we now moved into this century and people know there's teeth in the law, there's something to back them up?
You know, what I'd like to say here is that Wayne, as a humane officer, is only as good as the information the community provides us. He's not out policing the streets, and you know, he's one man. We have 3 full-time humane officers at the SPCA, and we depend on our community and their vigilance to watch and protect the animals that reside in our community. And a tip can be given to us anonymously. We will protect your identity for those very reasons that you had mentioned.
And Wayne, on that, to expound on that, you get a tip on something, or someone sends you photographs on a cell phone or email and says this dog's tethered for 10 hours in pouring rain, whatever, or hasn't eaten, it looks emaciated. But when you go to a scene, Wayne, without a search warrant, whatever, what are you up against? What legalities do you face to be able to look at the animal? I mean, you could be turned away pretty easily, I would think.
That's correct. For example, if there be an animal inside the house that we can't see, that owner doesn't have to let us in. However, if the person calling this in would come forward as a witness and testify whereby we could get a search warrant and use their information on the search warrant, and they may be called to be a witness in the case, then we could do something. When somebody will come forward and allow what they saw to be used in a search warrant, then we could go in. But other than that, if we can't see the animal and the person doesn't want us to see it, without any kind of evidence or probable cause, we can't do anything.
But to expand on what Wayne's saying, if Wayne can see the animal, then he can sometimes even seize the animal under exigent circumstances where the animal's life is in danger. So if the officer can observe the animal without having to do a search, he can follow up with what his information is just from that point of view.
And that's where those tips have to be timely.
Yeah.
If you see something happening at 8 o'clock at night, don't wait till 8 o'clock in the morning to call.
Right.
You've got to say, listen, it's important for the life of the animal and prevent abuse. I've got to call right now.
Well, I think programs like this are great because in the past people may have thought, well, nothing gets done. But now, you know, as word spreads that things are being done, then they get more confident that there's going to be action taken. And Wayne can tell you, the last few cases we've handled involving serious animal abuse have resulted in lengthy sentences for the perpetrators.
And are there different types of cruelty? You know, when we're thinking, you know, of a very extreme case.
Right.
But are there different types of cruelty?
There
that people should be
are.
aware
The
of?
statute is graded from an M3 to an M1 and now a felony. And it's pretty well defined in the statute what is the category of crime you've committed. And the penalties go up the more severe the crime.
So, for example, what would be something that people should be keeping an eye out for?
Well, if somebody's hitting an animal, abusing an animal, not providing proper food, water, shelter, even not providing vet care is an example of animal abuse. Needed vet care is not being provided, that can be reported to us.
And
If I could, I think when in doubt, call.
Yeah.
Let the professional take a look at the situation and make the determination whether or not there's an actual crime being committed.
I might add here, a lot of these new laws that have come out, some of them have a grading of a summary, which is the lowest grade. However, if there's circumstances involved with that includes, let's say, bodily injury or serious bodily injury or pain or even torture, then we can move them up in the misdemeanor area. And if it's really severe, then we can pull the felony on them. So.
And see, there's no greater form of torture, perhaps, than not being fed or being given water.
true.
So that can become serious real quick.
That to us is torture. In fact, I've cited some people who have failed to feed their dog, have been emaciated, and one current case happened to die. I cited them under torture because we feel starving to death is obviously torture.
Yeah.
And Wayne, on a personal note, when you're investigating these cases, long before it gets any kind of media attention or Gary's involved or even gets to the SPCA, I mean the actual physical place, what do you encounter personally with these folks? I mean, you're knocking on the door, you're not there to give them a Christmas gift or a greeting card. You're there because you got a complaint. So how do you handle the emotions and sometimes raw emotions and of that moment?
Try to be professional. Try to get both sides to everything, because not every case that we get is going to be a case. And we try to enter that way, thinking, well, this might not be what we think, so let's go in there with an open mind and find out what's going on, talk to the owner, and see what the situation is. And a lot of times they are not as severe as what we get the call on. Sometimes they are. But most of the time we do get cooperation and we're able to talk to the owner and get some kind of results there.
That's a good thing.
And you know, we've done a lot of stories too about the number of feral cats in our area, the number of that people are not taking responsibility for their cats. Now, what is the responsibility for someone that maybe has a cat that's gets a little bit out of control, that they do have a number of kittens and they try to keep them? Are they do they fall under this new law?
Well, they have to take care of the cats, but there's no law that says you have to have your cat neutered or spayed. So unfortunately, we continue, it's probably the biggest problem we have is the cats, because we have the dog situation fairly well under control, but the birth rates of cats are just so extraordinary.
We have an interesting graphic up explaining.
Yeah, I mean, you could go online and look at it, but if I often say to people, if you have 2 cats and you assume no deaths due to disease and injury or accident, how many cats do you have in 7 years? And they'll guess a couple hundred or 1,000. The answer is 430,000. Wow. So, I mean, you're dealing with birth rates that are very difficult to control, so you must spay and neuter your animals. And you should probably not let them out, but if you do, all the more reason they should be spayed and neutered.
one of the #1 reasons our shelter, any shelter, exists is overpopulation of domestic companion animals. That's why
Almost every restaurant has a feral cat community living in the shadows by it that comes out at night. And people don't see them, but there are millions of cats in this country. I don't even want to venture a guess, but it's a big problem.
And what are some of the responsibilities, when people take on a pet? A lot of times we mentioned that, we have them outside during the day. Someone thinks, oh, it's okay, they're outside in the heat or in the winter time. When someone comes in to adopt, what do you tell them about being a responsible pet owner?
we adopt indoor animals only first. We don't allow our animals to be kept outside. When we adopt a feline or a cat, it is an inside cat. It is not to be placed outside. If they can no longer take it or care for it, it must come back to the shelter. I think some of the biggest responsibilities as a pet owner is, first and foremost, is spay and neuter your animal. Spay and neuter your animal. We can beat that drum for a decade, and we'll still need to keep beating that drum. It really is. It's the answer to euthanasia. It's the answer to overpopulations in shelters. Spay and neuter your animal. And there are programs in our county and throughout this country that provide spay and neuter at low cost or free. They just need to contact their local shelter. We can hook them up with those folks in order to make that happen.
In answer to your question, too, the new law, Libre's law, has provisions in it that regulate sort of animal, control and how you treat your animal. For instance, it has a provision that you can't tether an animal outside on a leash for more than 9 hours in a day. In extreme weather conditions below 32, above 90, you can't have your animal out for more than a half an hour unattended. You have to have a leash that's at least 3 times the length of the animal from nose to tail. And, all the time when they're out, they're supposed to have adequate shelter, food, and water. So there are some behavioral modifications in the new law.
Could there be improvements made to this law? Is there something that maybe should have been added to it, or is there that you think that could have been even a little stricter?
Well, I'm always for additional protections for the animals, and some of the provisions, for example, only apply to dogs, cats, and horses. I mean, why? Why shouldn't they apply to other types of pets? The penalties, they've been severely increased. They still probably aren't enough in some cases. So there's always room for improvement.
I might add here, too, what Gary was saying, the new law, which I really like, it says all animals. Now, in the past, it would say dog or cat, or it would say domestic animal. The new law just says animals, any animal. So, in other words, somebody abuses, say, a wild animal, a squirrel or something like that in their yard, I could nail them on some kind of cruelty charge.
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, that's the way I'm reading, and that's exactly what it says.
And Wayne's correct. There are additional penalties for, like, poisoning a dog, cat, or a horse. So, there's now the protection for all animals, but additional penalties for certain classes of animals.
And it's a process. It's a journey. I mean, where we were before Libre's law, I'm going to guesstimate that 5 years from now, maybe sooner, we'll say, boy, that law was good, but it didn't go far enough, and it's a process. We covered several recent cases: Jenkins Township, Plains Township, Hazleton area. You're saying about cats. It's not a problem. It's out of sight, out of mind, unless those feral cats are living next to you.
Right.
And you have to deal with it. And the cats aren't scheming or plotting. It's nature.
They're just
Right.
living
That's
their
what
life.
they do. So spay and neuter.
Spay and neuter.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, there's someone meowing in the wings to meet you. You can see information on today's show on pahomepage.com or under the Newsmakers link. You're watching Newsmakers. We are a proud recipient of 2 Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Awards for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsmakers. This is Knuckles. This kitty cat needs a forever home. You're watching Newsmakers. I'm Jane Ann Bugd along with Andy Mahalchik. We're joined by Todd Hevner, Wayne Harvey, and Gary Tiroli from representing the SPCA of Luzerne County. And did you think we wouldn't have a kitty cat or a puppy on the show today? So we've asked Knuckles to join us. And he's one of the many animals that are available at the SPCA of Luzerne County. We feature them on our 11 a.m. show on Eyewitness News, Pet of the Week. And you can always go to their website to see who's available or stop by. There's many cats, dogs, guinea pigs, hamsters available.
Absolutely.
It's like Noah's Ark. You walk into the
There you
SPCA,
go.
only Noah's Ark exponentially bigger. And in all seriousness, folks, and a lot of people hear about the SPCA and the great work you do in your organizations and other SPCAs around the area. But when you go in there and you see the work that's being done, it's 24/7 basically, and it's organized chaos, but they know exactly what's happening. But again, there's no Daddy Warbucks out there for most of us. How do you get the money, Todd? How do you pay for this?
You know, largely we are funded through the generosity of our community. We do get a small stipend for stray dogs through the State Department of Agriculture, but it really is the fundraising events that we hold, the generosity of folks that believe in what we do, how we do it, and want to be a part of it. You know, there's people can time, talent, and treasure, we always say. Give us your time in the form of volunteering, your talent if you have one that you know, can help us spread the word like we're doing here today, and your treasure. You know, financial donations are the lifeblood of this organization.
And if you're someone at home that says, you know, I would like to give of my time, or I could maybe give you some supplies, what do you need?
Well, I would encourage those folks to jump on our website and take a look at our wish list. Some of the most common items we use are paper towels, bleach, dog food, dog food and cat treats. Litter is always one. We have, at any given time, we have likely somewhere between 150 and 200 cats. You can imagine how much litter that is on a daily, monthly basis. So there is a variety of other things, blankets, shredded paper, things of that nature that we need that are sort of maybe not quite in people's forefront, but jump on our website, look at our wish list. Join us for an event.
That's true.
We were talking before, we were talking about animal abuse, extreme cases, but the majority, correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of the animals you take care of, they're either brought there because the owners can't, they're strays, or the owners can't take care of them. What are some of the stories you guys hear at the SPCA? Why, when they bring animals in, they're not all just abandoned, but what are some of the reasons people bring their loved animals to the SPCA?
I think probably one of the most common, and Wayne, you can probably jump in on this as well, is I'm moving and I can't take them. You know, for us, I think every story we hear is heartbreaking. It's sad. All of them are just very sad.
Well, what's Knuckles' story?
Knuckles was a stray. Knuckles is a very unique cat. He has many fingers on his hands, both front and back paws, which is how he got his name of Knuckles. Very similar to the Hemingway cats that are all polydactyl as well.
So take us through the process. If I come in there looking for a pet and I find one that I just fall in love with, what happens next?
Well, we'd ask you to fill out a short 2-page application. It's very general, basic information, and we're looking for a history of responsible pet ownership. Veterinary references, personal references. We're trying to ensure the best way we can that the animal will have a positive experience, as well as the adoptive family will have a positive experience. We hope that when an animal leaves our shelter, it is forever. We really hope it doesn't come back to us.
And dare I bring up, I know we're 3-4 months away from the holidays, but, and we do stories every year, don't give an animal for a Christmas gift. Sight unseen, show up at the door with a box with a cat in it or a cage. That's a no-no.
It's bad news. You know, an animal is a serious responsibility. It's not something you want to spring on someone, you know, oh, hey, you're now the proud owner of Knuckles the cat.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that needs to be well thought out and agreed upon, by the family, because it really is a responsibility everybody needs to partake in.
On the way in, one thing I'd like to say is no one should hesitate to bring in an animal that they no longer want. Wayne and I have been involved in really horrific cases where people killed their animals, disposed of them in painful, torturous ways because they were afraid that they would have to pay a fee or be cited for some reason. If you don't want your animal, don't harm the animal. Bring him to the SPCA.
And you'll find them a perfect forever home.
I think there's a misnomer too. A lot of people I've been to talk to me about, they say, "Oh, we thought there was a charge to bring the animal in." We don't charge anything. It's free of charge. If you want to leave a donation, that's fine, but it doesn't require any money to bring an animal to the SPCA.
Well, we have about a minute left, and I do want to remind everyone that information on today's show and even more information can be found on pahomepage.com or under the Newsmakers link. You'll find information about the SPCA, about Libre's law, about if you want to adopt, and we'll have a link to their website so you can even take a look at some of the animals there, and you can again see them on our 11 a.m. show on Eyewitness News. So Todd, Wayne, and Gary, thank you so much for fighting for the rights of our furry friends. We want to thank Knuckles for joining us, and we hope Knuckles finds a home. For Andy Michalczyk and everyone behind the scenes, I'm Jane Ann Bugda. We want to thank you for making Newsmakers part of your day, and we'll talk again next time. And consider giving a loving pet a forever home.